The World Health Organization website here, current coronavirus disease COVID-19 training simulation exercise. Why are they running a simulation in parallel with a global pandemic? If there's a global pandemic, they don't need to run a simulation at the same time. We've got a long track record of this. 7/7, there was a simulation running, a precise simulation of the exact same event. This is what they do. Well, they run simulations. The simulations are sold by the media as real events. That's been the pattern since, I'm afraid to say, guys, the moon landing. I know it's going to get me some thumbs down by people who are still convinced we went to the moon, but we didn't. I did do a video that got 1.7 million views, actually 2.25 million views, before sustained pressure to bring it down. And, you know, I know all about it. We didn't go. I'll do a video about it and prove it. But it was a simulation. It was a simulation moon landing, and this is a simulation COVID-19 disease. I mean, why are they running a simulation? Come on, guys, we've got a global pandemic, yeah? So why are they needing to here an urban COVID-19 CIMEX to discuss critical issues, blah blah blah, pandemic, infectious disease. Here it is, PowerPoint presentation, supply for the subsequent improvement. A participant's guide and a facilitator's guide to explain what is expected from different people involved in the preparation and running of the exercise. Okay, so you know they're going to be running a simulation alongside a global pandemic. That's garbage. Now, if you want more proof that it's a simulation exercise, just have a look at this. I'll put this in the Wayback Machine. This is mind-blowing. This is on the. I've got access to the strategic intelligence. You've got to log in and jump through a few hoops and stuff, but then you get this infographic that is mind-blowing. It is it's tentacles, all these little tentacles here, and there's layers upon layers upon layers. You click on one of these and you go through to more tentacles, hundreds of them, and then more tentacles, and then more tentacles. They've got everything was planned out, everything. You have a look at some of these here. I'll give you my login if you want. You can go and have a look yourself. Global governance, and you click on global governance, and that'll open up a whole new, everything's on here. 5G, you know, how they're going to change the law and lock us all down. Everything was pre-planned. This thing here, which has got layers upon layers upon layers upon layers of stuff, and it covers everything, is all has all been pre-planned in advance to I mean, COVID-19 is the Trojan horse for this big globalist agenda, this big globalist plan. It's going to end up with us all being microchipped, and they've got everything here covered. Now I'll put this into the Wayback Machine, because something like this with all these layers and all these I mean, this is a big project. This is the kind of project I would have thought that would take, you know, maybe 6 months or something to put together. It's unbelievably sophisticated, the way they've got all this information all wrapped around COVID-19. According to the Wayback Machine, yeah, March the 15th this was live. March the 15th. Now on March the 15th people were still wondering whether this COVID-19 was anything, you know, there was still a lot of debate about whether it was serious and whether it was going to, I mean, we didn't have the lockdown until the 26th, was it the 26th? So they'd already decided, they'd already had this website up with their big global governance project, all centered around this alleged pandemic. You know, and they've got it all sussed out and all these tentacles in place and everything. You know, it's a big project here. You know, by March the 15th. You know, and like I say, something like this is going to take ages to do. And back in January and December, you know, no one knew that this was. I mean, don't forget, Boris didn't even bother closing the airports. He still hasn't, which just proves the whole thing's complete garbage. Because if we were serious about stopping a pandemic, we'd definitely be stopping flights coming in, or at least, you know, testing the people that were coming in. Okay, so this is mind-blowing. If you want to have a look at this, it's everything was all pre-planned here, layers and layers and layers. If we click on aging, for example, it's pretty disturbing, and this is going to lead on to where I want to take you next. Okay, so elder aging and elder caregiving, because one thing I didn't tell you, and I've been meaning to tell you, is about I know, quite a few months ago on Redwood's blog, a load of political types turned up and they started pushing this idea that old age people were the problem, you know, and we needed to do something drastic about it. And I was shocked that John was even letting these posts through moderation. But not only was he letting them through moderation, but he was seemingly giving them a platform to promote this idea that the old were the problem. And all his regulars were taking this, you know, taking it all seriously. I was really shocked. You can judge a society surely by how they treat their elderly folk. Anyway, listen to this. This is horrible. Okay, an aging population. Now, I didn't realise, according to the global elite, that the old people are the problem. As you'll see when I read you this, you know, they're the problem to global governance. They're the problem to the economy. I mean, they're not a problem. They're not a problem. Okay, this is what it says. As older populations expand faster than younger populations, it is disrupting traditional social structures where younger family members have had primary responsibility for caring for their elders and creating more dependence on hospitals and institutions. Okay, problems, always problems. The older a problem now, according to these global elitists. The gap between the need for elder caregiving and existing supply is widening. By 2060, there will be only one caregiver in Europe for every 51 people aged 80 or older, according to a European Commission projection. See, they've done all their research. They know that the older are a major problem, and well, let me just read on. As elder caregiving needs increase, a so-called caring economy is emerging. They hate this caring economy. It is having a significant. This is why it is having a significant impact on the workforce, as it leads to increased absenteeism and decreased productivity. It hinders gender parity efforts by having a disproportionately negative effect on female employers, as women make up the majority of elder caregivers. Well, first of all, why is that negative? Why is caring for old people so negative? I mean, maybe these women like caring for old people. You know, some people do. They actually do care for old people, and they might actually like it. So according to this, it's negative. It's having a negative effect on female employees, as women make up the majority of elder caregivers, as if that's, you know, the worst job ever. You know, they could be working in a fish and chip shop or something. That's even worse, surely. Looking after the elderly is not a negative thing, but according to these globalists here on this creepy, horrible COVID-19 site, it is. Okay? Yeah. Oh yeah, look, and slows overall economic growth. So old people are slowing economic growth. Working caregivers must often take time off, pass up promotion, or leave the workforce altogether. Oh, it's terrible, you know. I mean, you can tell the kind of people that wrote this. Meanwhile, really selfish. Meanwhile, employers are losing valuable talent. Oh, terrible. And greater pressure is being placed on social systems. Other impacts: decreased earnings and purchasing power, and negative effects on caregivers' health and well-being. Well, what about the old people? Okay, so the caregivers' health and well-being, which in turn further drives up overall healthcare costs, according to the Global Coalition of Agrigs 2016 report, the value of home care. The need to provision quality care for the elderly is already disrupting national economies. Okay, so it's a disaster. The elderly are now a disaster. They're disrupting the global system. Countries in Europe and North America, as well as Japan and the Republic of Korea, are looking to implement significant reforms. They're looking to implement significant reforms in order to meet the need of aging populations. Okay, what are these significant reforms? It's not anything to do with, you know, getting them to sign do not resuscitate orders in old people's homes or anything, is it? Because that is what's happening at the moment all over the world. In addition, as emerging economies such as Brazil, China, Turkey and South Africa grow older at a faster rate than they become wealthier, the socio-economic impact of elderly care in those countries could be particularly devastating. Okay, the elderly are now devastating to everyone else. New solutions are essential. I don't like this at all. Greater prominence for the home care industry, for example, could help alleviate the impact of health and social care costs on public budgets. The industry in turn can spur economic growth and provide employment opportunities for women and minorities, according to... So what's important here is women and minorities, but not the elderly. Have you noticed that? According to Caring in America, a 2011 report from the Paraprofessional Healthcare Institute, in addition, in order to swiftly adapt to the new realities of aging, incentives for saving for long-term care, more training and education for elder caregivers, and an application of innovative technology will be critical. So they're going to try and get people to save for their own, basically for their own, to pay for their own healthcare. Okay, that was horrible. Don't you agree? That was absolutely disgusting from start to finish. You know, that's discrimination. That is, if they wrote that against minorities or against women or against gays, you know, everyone would be going crazy. But because it's old people, you know, all that entire article, problem, devastation, you know, this is all describing old people. It's disgusting. Okay, so this is the COVID-19 action plan and the big project for global governance. I mean, this is just mind-blowing. You've got to have a look at this. It's just absolutely layers upon layers upon layers of stuff. If I click on any of these, it'll open up another spider's web of tentacles. See? Just mind-blowing. Every single one opens up another spider's web of tentacles. Now, you cannot tell me, according to the Wayback Machine, March the 12th this was up, you cannot tell me that the developers chucked that up in a couple of... I mean, even on March the 12th, you couldn't have predicted that COVID-19 was going to be doing all these things. So COVID-19 is the, you know, the Trojan horse here. Everything links off from that, and you just go into networks upon networks upon networks of pre-planned action on the back of this simulation. Okay, so we've just learnt there that the elderly are being screwed over. Oh, they hate the elderly. Now let's have a look at this. Okay, this is where we get this where it gets really worrying. Okay, so first of all, cancer rates. Before we get into the old people, there's been a 2,700. This is in the UK, so imagine what it is in America. Okay, 2,700 fewer people are being diagnosed every week, cancer research says. Okay, so that's 2,700 people with cancer that are not being diagnosed per week. Okay, now imagine that's not going to show up on the ONS stats on week 14, is it? Them deaths. Let's say half of those die now because they haven't been diagnosed and they've got cancer. Let's say half of those die per week. That's what, you know, 1,400 or something. Not going to show up on the ONS stats, you know, for maybe 6 months, but they're going to show up. Okay, so absolutely disastrous. It gets worse and much worse. Yeah, here the Financial Times admitting that we've got 11,000. Here we go. Look, 24%. The ONS said on Tuesday it had asked Public Health England to investigate why care home deaths were rising so sharply. Okay, this is what's happening now. Yeah, 24% of deaths normally occur in care homes in the UK. The analysis suggests that just under 11,000 more people than normal have died in residential care since the start of the outbreak. And remember, this is not COVID-19. Okay, I mean, I don't need to add anything to that. 11,000 people more since the outbreak have died in residential care homes. And this is the UK, remember, so if this is happening globally, and I believe it is, I've got information that similar sort of things happening in Spain. Yeah, the lockdown is killing people too. So this article here in Spiked, this is mind-blowing what I'm just about to tell you. Hospital admissions are down 100,000. This is in the UK. 100,000 per week. 100,000 people per week are not going to the hospital, and this is because the hospitals still largely empty, and the media are, you know, showing crying doctors and nurses saying they can't cope, That's stopping people going to hospital. Even people with heart attacks, the ambulance people are saying they're turning up and the people are already dead because they're refusing to phone 999 because they've been told that the hospitals are just absolutely snowed under and they can't cope. So it's just a disaster. It's just a mind-blowing disaster. I mean, you just read this. I'll put the links below. The genocide of elderly, and the thing is, the propaganda is, and the people, the government people will come and who watch too much TV, and they will say that I don't care for the elderly. That's what they'll say. They'll say you don't care for the elderly, and yet they haven't got a clue what's really happening. It's just an Orwellian opposite. So they think we're saving the elderly, and the truth is, figures are extraordinary. In week 14, there were close to 160,000 emergency admissions to English hospitals. In week 14 of this year, there are around 60,000. Okay, 60,000. So that's a difference of 100,000. 100,000 in a week. That's what's happening. 100,000. Okay, this is why we're getting massive excess deaths showing up on the ONS stats for week 14 and week 15. Absolutely mind blown. Okay, I've got more. Redwood, by the way, this is me. He's put me at the bottom because he agrees with it. There are only two explanations for the extra deaths on the ONS stats. One, someone has been collecting deaths and registering them all at one time to make it look like there's a tiny pandemic. The ONS seems to allow this. Or two, the lockdown is killing far more than this alleged virus. Well, like I say, John puts his favourite post at the bottom. He's put mine at the bottom again there, making that because he knows that it's the. Well, now as far as the ONS stats are concerned, let's just nip this in the bud once and for all. Something is very wrong with the ONS stats. 5-year average all deaths. So we've got a genocide going on here, but caused by the lockdown. As far as this influenza line is concerned, we've got to sort this out once and for all. This is what it looks like. Okay, and this is a 5-year average on the ONS. So the ONS have been consistently lying about their influenza and pneumonia stats, because no other country's stats looks anything like that. I've spent a bit of time looking into it. Look, this is America. Centre of Disease Control, and it peaks February, massive peak in February, and March is still quite hot. Yeah, a week. Here we are. Look, week 10, we got a massive peak. Week 12, still. Week 13, week 14. Look at this. Okay, this is what an influenza chart should look like. Should look like that or like that. Okay, but the ONS, for some inexplicable reason, just goes up a little bit in January and then goes slowly down all the way. Oh, I don't know what the hell's going on there, because that is just not right at all. Yeah, and again, turning to event 201, just reading what they've put here, basically the next event 201, so the next severe pandemic will not only cause great illness. I love the way this is like a prophecy. I mean, just look, let me just point out what they put in. The next severe pandemic will not only cause great illness and loss of life, but could also trigger major cascading economic and societal consequences that could contribute greatly to a global impact and suffering. Yeah. So the politicians have basically done exactly that. They've created a cascading economic and societal consequences that have contributed greatly to a global impact and suffering. So how come Event 201 managed to predict this chaos so perfectly? I mean, they knew perfectly well that the major impact would be the economic disaster caused off the back of it by politicians and the media just going nuts. Yeah, so you have an Event 201 that coincides pretty much with the pandemic, the start of the pandemic, yeah? And you predict perfectly that that's going to trigger a major cascading economic disaster. Yeah? So what was the point? What was the point of Event 201 if that is exactly what happened? You know, they predicted that there would be a major economic disaster, and you know, and there was. You know, it's like a prophecy, isn't it? That's what it is, because the whole thing was pre-planned. Thousands missing out on diet. Yeah, 2,700 a week. Absolutely mind blowing. So we got to stop it. We got to stop it.